Hey guys, welcome back
Hello.
to Monday Night Mythbusters. I'm Dr. Carolyn George from Vita Integrative Medicine, and this is Leslie Harrington, Transformational Coach.
Hey guys.
Welcome everybody tonight. So glad to see that you're joining us. And we've got a great topic tonight. We're going to be talking about insulin and insulin resistance and how that applies to weight loss. Hey there, Marianne.
Hi, Marianne.
Thanks for joining. So what I'd like to do tonight, we're going to kind of give you a little bit of the physiology first so that you can understand what's going on. And hey there, Sally. Hey, Nick.
Hi, Sal. Hi, Nick.
And Brian. Hey, Brian.
Rockin' and rolling.
Rockin' and rolling, exactly. And so tonight we're going to be talking about insulin and its impact on weight, but also just its impact in general and why you should be concerned about it, even if you're not diabetic or pre-diabetic, but why you should really be concerned about it if you are pre-diabetic or diabetic, because the diabetes piece is really not about the sugar, it's much more about the insulin.
Yes.
So hold on to your hats, we're going to do a little physiology first.
Yeah, I think the common, when you hear of insulin, a lot of people don't really know how it relates to them. And it relates to every part of how you manage your blood sugar, and how you manage your blood sugar relates to how you manage your weight and the potential for weight loss. So it's funny, we don't really usually talk in those terms when you're talking about weight loss and dieting and things like that. But if you start to look at it in a way of you having a little more control over how your body uses fuel, you'll understand it a little better and why insulin's really important for everybody, not just the people who are dealing with any type of diabetes, type 1 or type 2, which we'll touch on a little bit what that means. So insulin resistance is actually a pretty more used term now than you've heard in the past. Hi, Kristen.
Hey there, Kristen.
So yeah, you hear about it more, right? I mean, I think it's
so.
more of
I think people
hot
are becoming
word.
a little bit more aware. Yeah. And I think because we've got so many diabetics and pre-diabetics, that conventional doctors are really even starting to talk about this a lot more.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think it's
Yeah, and you
really
think of
getting
it
out there.
too, like insulin, right? So my dad was on insulin, so it's like a physical thing you inject in yourself, but it's something that your body makes and it should make. And there's a lot of significant reasons why it's present in your blood, or in your body. So
Okay.
Science, let's hit that.
Okay, so insulin is a hormone. It's made in your pancreas by these little cells called beta cells, and it's one of those hormones that's got multiple uses. But some of the key uses, to kind of make it really simple, is it's around when you've eaten a lot. When we think about caveman, when they'd have a feast in the fall, or if they got a deer and everybody was feasting, there would be a lot of insulin. So anytime that you're bringing food in, that insulin is released in order to help get the food, the nutrients, the sugar in particular, from your blood into your cells. So when you think about diabetics, they have high blood sugar, but they can't get it into their cells. It's a famine even though you have a feast, right? These cells are being starved. So you eat, the sugar goes into your blood, and then from your blood is supposed to go to your cells. And insulin is that key that opens the cells up and lets the sugar get into your cells. So when we talk about insulin resistance, that key is kind of like a rusty key where you're trying to open the cell and it's not working. So put down that key and go, hey body, send me some more keys. This one's not working. And so then you get another key, it's still not working. Another key, okay, now it starts to work. So over time with insulin resistance, you build up high amounts of insulin. And if you remember, I said that insulin tells you that you've got a feast. So what else does the body do when it's got a feast? And if you're think about caveman times, not current times, but caveman times, we had a feast. We didn't know when the next famine was going to be. We didn't know when we were going to be able to eat. So the body has evolved so that that's a signal that, hey, store it, save it.
Yeah.
And the body saves sugar as fat, right? So whenever you've got high amounts of insulin going around, you are in the storage mode.
Yeah. Insulin is a fat storage hormone. Like that's the best way to put it. So anytime you've got insulin from something you've eaten, from stored fuel, from not being able to, when it's resistant and that key can't open up, it's circulating in your bloodstream, and it's telling your body, store. Don't burn, store. And it's preserving energy, and in theory it's trying to work for you.
Right.
It's
Once
just
you
when
live,
when your
live
goals
through the winter.
Yeah, when your goals are fat loss and your goals are trying to utilize some of this fuel, it's really going to work against you unless you have an awareness and understanding of how you can really manage your insulin and manage your blood sugar, which most people don't think about doing if they don't really necessarily have to.
Right.
And so what will help tonight is to kind of help you understand that a little, and it might give you a little better picture of how much more control you have over what types of fuel you're burning when you're in the gym, how you can manage that insulin resistance. Brian asked an excellent question, which is super common to see, that your A1C and your glucose, your fasting glucose is normal, but your insulin's high. So what does that mean? That means that you have a high insulin response, but your body's using the fuel that was there at one point, but it's not tapping into that stored fuel. Right. It's not able to get that key to open the door.
Exactly, and so your insulin level goes high. So if you've got an A1C and your glucose are normal, but you're showing some insulin resistance, if you measure your insulin, you most likely are going to show an abnormal response, where it's higher than it should be for fasting or for after you eat. But it's working to keep your sugar down, and if your sugar is down over time, then your A1C will be down, because the A1C is just measuring your sugar over 3 months.
Yeah.
So that can, and that does happen in all your pre-diabetics until you hit the place where your insulin no longer keeps up with the demands. It's going higher, and it's not getting that sugar into your blood. And then you become pre-diabetic, and then you become diabetic.
Yeah. And that's where I talk about the storage unit, because at that point your cell is completely so overfueled that even if you had like glucose to be brought into there, your cells are completely backed up. So the key's not working because there's really no place to put the stuff, right? And so it's a really good question to your point too, because it's a misunderstanding where people go to the doctor, they have a normal A1C, they have a normal fasting, but they don't test their insulin. So they don't understand that they might be insulin resistant, but they're still struggling with weight. They're still struggling with some of the other symptoms that come along with high or low blood sugar, and it's not evident from some of the traditional testing. You really have to do some other types of testing, but asking for an insulin test is definitely a really good visual.
That's one way
to understand.
And actually, while we're talking about tests that you can do, so the fasting insulin is a great test. If you end up having to do a glucose tolerance test because your doctor's worried about your sugar, ask them to also measure your insulin at that 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour mark. You can also do, in a regular cholesterol test, a lipid panel. You're looking at your triglyceride, and that will typically go up when your sugars are going up. And if you do a lipid panel called an NMR, which is what LabCorp does, to look at the advanced lipid panel, so they will then actually give you an insulin resistance score. So there's different ways that you can come about this information depending on the comfort your doctor has with ordering those tests.
And I was just listening to, and we didn't talk about this, but Dr. Alan Christensen just put out some research in his new book about 80% of the glucose that's actually in our body is not always from what we eat. It's from our liver not responding to the insulin response. So you can have like an insulin resistance at the liver level too, which is a little more complex, and we won't really get into that. But it's important to understand that the insulin resistance, you can have insulin resistance even if you're eating somewhat clean.
Yeah, sure you can.
Yeah.
Because everything you eat, fats, proteins, and carbohydrates, can all be broken down into and used for fuel, and ultimately create some kinds of sugars. So the ones that are slower to digest, like your fats and your proteins, are going to do that. They're going to spike your insulin less, but it's still possible to affect your insulin with that.
Well, Deanna asked another interesting question, and it's really interesting because sometimes the fruit sugar is like the wolf in sheep's clothing because it's more predominant fructose. Fructose can't be utilized by your cells in the same way that glucose can.
Right.
So it's going and being metabolized by your liver. So it can be a little bit more taxing in that sense. So
and some people are deficient in the enzymes that break those down, and so they have more of an issue.
Yeah, and the fructose, when you're dealing with fruit sugar, you're just dealing with more complexity in that you're getting the fiber, you're getting some of the nutrients that go with it. So you're getting more bang for your buck, if you will, when it comes to, we'll talk about simple and complex carbs. So it is fruit sugar. At the end of the day, sugar is sugar. And it's just
fruit
used by your
sugar
body
is-
different.
Yeah, fruit sugar is not bad. Like your high fructose corn syrup, bad.
Yeah, bad.
That's not good. The table sugar you put in your drinks,
Bad.
not good.
In large quantities.
But fruit sugar, because it comes with all those wonderful little micronutrients and fiber and lots of other good things, are in my books just fine as long as they're eaten in moderation.
Exactly. And I think some people, when it comes to fruit, like having a number of servings, we talk a lot about, have your 7 to 9 servings, fruits and vegetables, and people say, I had 9 servings of fruit.
Yeah.
That's not going to be great either. But having your 2-3 servings of fruit a day, not. And then of course there's the more optimal fruits that have the more benefit, that have the less sugar, that have the higher fiber, the higher nutrient content,
Yes.
things like that.
So let's go back to a little bit more physiology, if you can hang in there with me. So we have got carbs, proteins, and fats. And I want to talk a little bit about the carbs. So you have simple carbs and you have complex carbs. And they tend to get grouped together, but they're really not the same. Those simple carbs are like starches. So your rice, your white potato, your pasta, your bread, your sweets. Those things become or are sugar, and just boom, they give you a little blast.
Immediate
That's
conversion.
why you have a bagel in the mid-morning, because that bagel becomes sugar the minute you put it in your mouth. You can even feel it dissolving, and it's going to give you energy. Right?
And then an hour or two later, you're going to crash.
Right.
And your body's going to want more.
Right.
So
whenever you have those simple carbs, your body just soaks it right in, even in your mouth, like I say, underneath your tongue. You can start to, that's why people will put like a little cracker or a little piece of sugar or something in a diabetic's mouth, because even in the mouth, that sugar gets absorbed and will increase your blood level. So you can imagine if you're eating a whole bagel, your blood sugar level is going to really rise, go very high. And the body's response is going to be, hey, okay, feast, let's take care of that sugar. Let's put in some insulin, and the insulin comes, lets the sugar gets into the cells, so then the sugar starts to drop. So you've got, it's like a roller coaster, it goes up, and then it comes down, and typically your body will overshoot. So then you're going down a little lower, that's when you start to get the craving, and you need that mid-morning donut to keep going, right? Or you have your coffee with sugar or something like that to give you some more energy. So up you go, then down you go, and then you have that donut, and back up you go, and then down you go, and then it's lunchtime, and then you have a sandwich that's got some bread, up you go, and then mid-afternoon, gotta have a little sweet or something to keep my energy going, so up you go again. So you're kind of roller coastering all day long, and the time that you're high and the time that you're super low, which is most of the time, is when you are fat storing. So if you're super high with your insulin, you're fat storing for the reasons I just talked about. And if you're super low, your blood sugar is really dropped low, then the metabolism slows down so that it's not burning any of that fat, because we gotta keep this person alive. So it shuts that down, and you also don't burn your fat. So you only burn when you're in that sweet zone, which is not much of your day if you're doing that carb loading.
Yeah, and I think it's important too, because we've gotten to a place where we've almost lost track of our hunger levels, like when are we really hungry, when we're really satiated. And some of that has to do with some of the hormones that tell our brain we're full, we're hungry. And that's why we talk a lot with certain conditions, but having, you don't have to eat every 2 hours. If you're managing your blood sugar in a way that you're not doing these heavy up and down spikes, and you're doing a little bit of this, the longer that you go in between your snacks, depending on the person and depending how their blood sugar is managed, that's going to minimize your insulin presence in your blood. So that's going to minimize your fat storage. So the more often that you're giving your body some time to digest and break down food and use the fuel and actually burn it, the more time that you're going to be without having insulin present in your blood. So
high amounts.
To high amounts, exactly. And in having it, so protein will generate an insulin response smaller than carbs. Mm-hmm. Carbs will generate an insulin response. Pure fat will actually most often not. So your MCT oils, coconut oil, maybe ghee, clarified butter that doesn't have any of the whey or the casein. Those things that's why you hear a lot about the intermittent fasting and having that in the morning. That's going to keep you from actually truly breaking a fast, right? But really understanding that you don't have to eat every 2 hours to manage your blood sugar. If you're eating the right foods, ideally that insulin's only going to go to the point that it needs to go, because it's actually going to start to level off.
So then you might ask, Kristen asks, is there a best time of day to eat carbs? So we'll talk about that and good foods, how to kind of mix. So I didn't talk at all about what a complex carb is. So complex carbs are like fruits, vegetables. These are things that have the sugar in them, but also have a lot of fiber. And the benefit of that fiber is that instead of getting that blast off of sugar, because there's fiber that's harder to digest, so you don't get that high rise, it comes up much slower. So when it's coming up slower, you need less insulin. And then the insulin comes and then tapers it down. You can't see my fingers there. And it tapers it down. So instead of going like this, you're going like this.
Yeah, and you can obtain that similar objective through combining your foods. So if
Yes.
you are eating more of a simple carbohydrate, you want to make sure that you're combining that with protein or fat, because the protein will actually bind to the glucose in your blood and it will help escort it. So you don't ever want to be eating a simple carb by itself. You want to have some sort of combination. So that's why they have, like, if you're eating an apple, you might put a little nut butter. Or, you know, you might have, if you're having some fruit, you know, you might want to have some almonds, or just combining your foods is going to help keep that blood sugar a little more stable when it comes to eating carbs. You want to make sure that you're...
Yeah, and you can combine it with fats, good fats like olives. You can combine it with the nuts, the nut butters, you know, just really including fiber. So even carrots, they're very starchy, but they've got some fiber. So
yeah, you might put a little hummus.
you might, a little hummus with that. That's going to help. So just really that combining, so that you're not just eating sweet things by themselves, is generally better.
Yeah.
And what time of day to do that? Well, there's not a huge number of studies, but Leslie and I both agree that trying to eat within the light hours are better. Try not to eat after like 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock. So once it gets dark, you're trying to minimize the food that you're eating and let your gut rest so that you can get ready for bed. There is some evidence that trying to not have so much of those simple carbs first thing in the morning and have more of a protein meal first thing in the morning to get your body kind of just started. Like, just turn it on, but don't like hit it, right? Don't punch it.
Well, when we were talking about the standard American diet, right? You're talking about your pastries, your breads, your... You know,
French toast,
if you're eating
waffles.
that type of thing, you're going to definitely get an over response from your insulin, and that's going to cause that extreme drop.
Yeah.
When you're doing the higher fat, higher protein in the morning, your insulin is a little more sensitive in the morning, meaning it's more reactive, because everything's happening in the morning. It's just come off of everything resting. You've got your higher cortisol, your blood sugar sometimes is going to be more sensitive in the morning. So that eating that higher fat, higher protein, then, you know, you get the whole pre-workout, post-workout, all those conversations. You know, it is important to have insulin a little bit as a post-workout, because you do want to get those nutrients delivered to the muscles. What kind is the key? You don't want to go and eat a bagel if you're going to defeat the purpose of what you've just done. But if you're going into a fasted workout, a lot of people say, what do I eat before my workout? Do you want to burn sugar or do you want to burn fat?
Right.
So it's, you go into your workout with either whatever you just ate and utilizing that glucose while your body's in fat storage because your insulin's present, or do you want to go into that workout from a fasted state where your body says, oh, I need fuel, and it's then utilizing the fats, fuel for fat.
It's going to burn that fat much better. And Deanna says, I have Hashis, and intermittent fasting along with a low-carb diet did wonders for me to help me lose weight. Yes, and that intermittent fasting is actually really catching on, and there's a lot of really cool studies looking at that and the benefits with the insulin resistance, because when you go into that somewhat fasting state, when you're not eating for 12 to 16 hours, your body does a great job of cleaning house. It starts to burn some of that excess fuel. It's doing all those good things. Emptying those storage units so that you can be more sensitive when you do eat. Yeah.
Yeah. So with the intermittent fasting, with women, I guess. What is your opinion on that? As far as women with the different, depending on your body, right? So I've seen a lot of people that do so well with intermittent fasting. I think the predominant is, especially men.
Right.
If you're dealing with some adrenal stuff or hormonal stress and things, you do want to understand what's happening with your blood sugar. I have seen people whose blood sugar actually will spike at certain points because of the stress, the imagined stress on your body. So intermittent fasting is something that I think is important to understand before you're doing it. Obviously, you had you knew what you were doing. Making sure that you're working with somebody that knows how to help and make sure that it's actually right for you.
Right, because especially if you don't have a lot of fat stores and you're doing that, sometimes that can be a strain on the body. So you've got to make sure you got enough nutrition. Yeah. And that you're digesting well, and there's a lot of things you want to make sure of. So making sure that you're working with a good professional, ideally a functional medicine professional. Just put a plug in there for us. And
I don't know that a doctor would know what intermittent fasting is, right?
No, actually, I think there's
Is it getting out there?
It's getting out there. Yeah, I think they're really doing a good job with getting some
conventional
exposure.
route?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I do think so.
So yeah, share with your doctor, Deanna.
Has anybody there heard of intermittent fasting other than Deanna? Give a thumbs up. And if there's any doctors out there listening, give me a thumbs up if you know of what intermittent fasting is and the benefits of that. So those are some of the key things we wanted to touch on. We also wanted to make sure that you know that using spices and herbs is really beneficial to insulin balance, and so bringing those in rather than using a lot of sugar and sweeteners can be great for your body. So those spices and those herbs are really like little medicines that you take in very small doses that do great things to your body. They're antioxidants, they're different kinds of nutrients, they're anti-inflammatory, they have tons of benefits. So use those spices and herbs liberally.
Yeah, so some other ways to improve insulin sensitivity. So again, you're going to hear the familiar whole stress and sleep preaching that we do every single week because it's so powerful. And the sleep, they say if you have one horrible night's sleep of one like 24-hour deficiency, you're as insulin as a diabetic the following day.
As insulin resistant. Yeah.
So it has a very significant impact that when you're not getting a good night's sleep. Again, when you're in your sleep, I call it like that's the magic time that your body's doing all of its restoration and reparative things that it needs to do that during the day we just are not physically capable of doing.
Our energy's going elsewhere.
Yeah.
To do it.
And you physically can't be doing healing when your body's in a sympathetic mode, right? When you're in the rest and digest mode, your body can do some things to kind of help itself. And in our society, most of us are in this constant stress, flight or flight during the day. So be mindful of when you have that downtime of like really, really taking advantage of it. So with sleep. And then on the flip side, the exercise aspect, the power of exercise, specifically high intensity interval training, as there's a lot of studies that support insulin resistance being the benefit of HIIT training. So looking at HIIT training, and then of course for people with some more, cortisol issues or adrenal issues, some of those restorative exercises are going to be really positive for that too. Yeah, and then diabetics, even simple walking. 30 minutes of walking 5 days a week. There's some powerful evidence just for that simplistic movement.
You would be amazed what walking does. In fact, even my mother, she's diabetic, and she will say that if her sugar's high, she just goes for a walk and she'll come back and it'll be back down. Yeah. It is great.
There's ways if you do wake up with high blood sugar, and there are some people that wake up with high fastings, hydration, powerful. You've got to get some water in there because what that does is it dilutes the actual blood, and it helps take some of the sugars to go from this concentrated sugar to diluted sugar. So now it's kind of like less intense through your bloodstream as you're moving it out. Plus you're increasing your blood flow through that hydration. So getting lots of water the minute that you wake up in the morning is going to help move out some of that blood sugar that might have been overactive during the night. Same with apple cider vinegar is one that's been shown to help with insulin resistance. It's actually shown to help with insulin resistance because of its effect on lowering blood sugar. So that's another one of the little
digestion.
Right. Fruits and veggies, we talked a little bit about that. Yep. Really, again, the fiber, the mixing of the proteins and the fats helps escort things out of your bloodstream.
And let's just spend a brief minute on some symptoms of low blood sugar.
Yes, how do you even know if your blood sugar is off, right?
So high blood sugar, this is generally with insulin resistance, you're not going to have high blood sugar. But if it was to get too high or you're pre-diabetic and you're worried about it, sometimes you don't have any symptoms. That's the most common thing is that you don't have symptoms, but you might start to go to the bathroom a lot. You're peeing a lot. You feel like you got to go empty your bladder every few hours. You can't stay away from a bathroom. You might get a headache. You might get blurry vision. You might start to be really thirsty. You might start to lose weight. That's a real common thing in type 1 diabetics. They start to really lose weight. Type 2 diabetics tend to be gaining weight. So, general kind of differentiators, but they're not hard and fast rules. If your blood sugar is low, then you generally feel it. You get lightheaded, you get dizzy, you get weak, you might feel like you're going to pass out, you might get palpitations. What am I missing?
Pale, sweating,
sweating.
Irritable,
sweaty,
cranky.
Yes. Yeah, very cranky, right?
Yeah. And confusion, like you could be a little loopy.
Yes, and some people, like diabetics, will start to recognize it. They know when their sugar's getting too low for them, and they'll get that sweaty, clammy, kind of confused feeling. But hopefully you don't get there.
Yeah.
Hopefully you're taking care of it before you get there. So those are some symptoms, obviously, to watch out for. And if you notice them, then ask your doctor to check your blood sugar and check your hemoglobin A1C, and ideally check your insulin. Although a lot of them won't do that, and most endocrinologists won't do that because they believe that it doesn't really reflect what's going on in the body. I think there's a lot of good studies that show otherwise, but that's why you can always go to a functional medicine provider, and they'll typically do those.
Yeah, and really, I always say knowing your numbers, you own your health. And with the blood sugar, 90% of people who are pre-diabetic don't know it. So it's not enough to just go for your annual blood work and have your doctor go, oh, you're great, when you're a 99 fasting and a 5.7 A1C. Those are trends. It doesn't happen overnight.
And the 5.7 is the upper limit of normal.
Yeah. Like these are trends. These are things that happen over a period of time. It's not typical that you come like an acute onset diabetes unless you have some sort of pancreatic damage and you're going type 1, right?
Well, it can be picked up as acute because people don't
they don't know the trend.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. So it typically is progressive, and it's coming up. So
it comes up years before it actually gets to the diabetes range. And so if you're watching and your sugars have been, again, the normal is under 99, so from about 65 to 99. If you've been trending 80, 85, 80, 85 for years, and then you start going 85, 90, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, that's where you got to be watching out. From that 85 to 99 is really where I really start to work with people to get their sugars back down, look to see if they're insulin resistant, what else are they doing that's going on.
Yeah, and a lot of people find out in like a hospital setting, like they're in emergency, they're like, oh, who knew they have these crazy high blood sugar and they didn't know. And I know that happened with, with my parents. So you do see that a lot. Questions, I mean, we're wrapping up here. We do have some, if anybody has questions, we're not going to get into the difference between type 1 and type 2 because we're not really talking about it as it relates to diabetes as much as we want you to understand how it relates to you losing weight and how it relates to you putting your body in fat storage mode versus utilizing some of that fuel that's stored instead of what's constantly in your bloodstream. So it's first come, first serve. Mm-hmm. If you have glucose in your blood, your body has to burn through that before it even considers to pull from fat stores. Right. So making sure that your bloodstream is clean, and then you start to burn out that fuel. You can't keep fueling and not burning through that fuel before you're actually going to be at a place where you're going to lose weight. And at the end of the day, you're looking to improve your metabolic function, meaning that you want your body to utilize the energy. So when that happens, you've got your body working for you. Right. Instead of you trying to work so hard to burn calories, your metabolism is doing the work for you. So you're like a little furnace inside.
Right. Exactly. burn. Dana says, I'm in constant stress as a claims adjuster. Yes, I can understand that, especially in South Florida, if that's where you are. Do we know the new celery juice trend? Yes. Yeah. And actually, I've had a lot of people use that very successfully. Yes. Yeah. Celery is very cleansing. It's a bit of an estrogen, a little bitter, so it's got a lot of nutrients, a lot of fiber. The one thing I would say is try to use the fiber in it. Have a juicer that keeps the fiber in it versus extracts it, because then you're losing so much that's so important for the fiber, and that fiber is important to keep your blood sugar down. So when you're making juices, when you're doing the extractor form and you're just getting the juice out, that's where all the sugar is, and you're not benefiting from the fiber that could be in there. So something like a Vitamix or something that's a powerful mix that rotates and gets that fiber just all broken up but in the same drink is really the best. Yeah,
she's referring to that medical medium too, which I've heard a lot about. He's doing a lot of stuff now on thyroid, and the celery juice, it's an empty stomach, no fiber, it's juice. Right. Certain times of day. Chris says in any time of the day. I'm not familiar with exactly what his protocol is. Yeah. I've heard both morning and evening, and at both times I've heard empty stomach. Mm-hmm. But I haven't done any digging as far as it as a protocol and how he uses it, other than the healing benefits of the juice itself.
Yeah, and I think it's got definitely some benefits.
Yeah.
So enjoy that celery, and if you don't like it as a juice, just eat it. Put some almond butter on it, sprinkle it with the spice, whatever you like, but just go ahead and chow down.
Yeah, Deborah says she's been using it, she can attest. I've been doing the celery juice too. Not for very long, probably a few weeks, and not consistently every single day. I order it online, so I'm experimenting with that. So I might be
So we'll report back to you.
We will report back.
So we're going to sign off and wish you a wonderful evening. Make sure that if there's anybody that you love that you think could benefit from this information, please feel free to share it either on Facebook, or we always post the following day to YouTube, so you can access it even if you're not on Facebook, so we totally understand that. And then next week we're going to be talking about cholesterol and how to read your cholesterol panel, and the difference between a traditional cholesterol panel and an advanced lipid panel.
Guys, this is going to be awesome, because I sat with we were here hanging around one day, and I was like, oh, and she whipped out this chart, and like mind-blowing the clarity that I had around understanding cholesterol.
Yeah.
And it's just really, really think about tuning in next week, because it's going to be really, really, really educational.
So I might even have props. We'll see. Okay.
Chris, you need to have Timmy watch next week as well.
Okay, Timmy's on notice. Okay, guys, thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, guys.
Everybody stay warm if you're up north, and we hope to see you next week.
Yes, have a great week, guys.